Hi, today we're going to talk about functions and objects in JavaScript. And the outline is functions in JavaScript and objects in JavaScript. Functions in JavaScript. JavaScript lets you define function using the function keyword. Then these functions can also have a return value using the return keyword. And the function statement requires a name for the function, a list of parameters or arguments that will be passed to the function, and a command block that defines what the function does. For example, this syntax, we have the keyword function and then the function name will come here. And then right inside parentheses, you're going to have parameters being passed here. And later on, these parameters can enable us to pass arguments. And then once you have this parenthesis closed, then you'll have an opening bracket that will enclose all statements that are going to be executed. And after they executed, the closing bracket will close the function. So somebody would ask, why would we use functions? Functions are powerful concepts that enable programmers to write code once and use it over and over. And that's why they say that you can always reuse code. The goodness is that once you define something once, you don't have to recode it all the time. So it's all about define the code once and use it many times. Now, these parameters are listed inside the parentheses of the function definition. And we have seen that this here are the function parameters. And the function parameters are values received by the function when it is invoked. And the code inside the function will execute when something invokes the function. So a good example is when an event occurs. For example, a user is clicking a button, then that can be considered as a function that is being called to perform something. Or when it is invoked from a JavaScript code, or when it is automatically self-invoking. So functions are very important and they can be invoked or they can invoke themselves. The return statement in a function is used to return any valid expression that evaluates to a single value. And at the same time, when the interpreter gets or reaches this statement, it will stop executing that function. And the results are always returned using the return statement. The syntax is return and then there's an expression. A good example is the square of a number. You have function square x and then return x times x. So in this case, it has to ensure that this statement is executed, and it would mean that the function has come to an end, and the results will be returned using this statement. So if it's 10 by 10, then return will return 100. Next, a very important concept in JavaScript is the concept of objects. So I would want to say that objects are just like variables, only that they are special type of variables which have got properties, meaning you are able to store a value with associated properties which have got again values. So which is very, very, very powerful. And these objects are containers for named values. And then they contain properties and methods. And these methods would be used, or they can be called as functions to perform some activities. So objects are very important. There are three ways of creating objects in JavaScript. The very first one is to define and create a single object using the
Today we're going to talk about working with data
you can use the
information
keyword new. And thirdly, you can define an object constructor and then create objects of the constructed type. In this course, we would use the very first two ways of creating objects. This keyword is used in some of the programming languages, and in many times it is used to refer to as the owner of a function. So that should be remembered even as we program. Apart from the quote-unquote user-defined functions, JavaScript has got inbuilt functions and inbuilt objects. For example, the string objects, math objects, date objects, built-in functions. All these are very important because they ensure that we have utilized these functions to perform various tasks. And in our next class, we will see how these ones can be implemented practically. Otherwise, at the end of today's class, thank you.